Hickey looked at the engine readouts again. She stared at them for a long time before busting out cursing, slamming two of her primary arms against the console, thinking maybe they would change their readouts, but they didn't. She could curse loud enough that everyone in the engineering department could hear her. Those that looked over at the commotion could see that her small tail was flicking off in the breeze, a sign that she was extremely frustrated. Along with that, Hickey could think, if my species still had hair, I'd be pulling it out right now. Hickey had been the main engineer on this ship for nearly 10 of her solar cycles, and yet she could not diagnose the problem with the engines. For some reason, they were only getting a bare minimum 69% efficiency for the past solar rotation. No matter how many times she checked, she couldn't find the issue. Nothing was showing up on her diagnosis. In walks Jip, an insectoid right next to the captain. Seeing this, Hickey knew that she was in trouble again. The captain introduced Jip and said that he would be taking over fixing the ship. After all, he said, we cannot have a Quark battle cruiser unable to keep up with the fleet. The Quark was a coalition of systems and species that had actually banded together for mutual protection. The four species were only one system away from each other, so response to issues can be dealt with quickly without draining an entire species' coffers on defense. This only works, though, if the efficiency of the ship is no lower than 93%. Without this, the ship would go adrift for several minutes upon exiting FTL. In a hot zone, this could be bad. Really, really bad. With power down, they wouldn't be able to activate any defenses, fire any weapons, main or otherwise, or even deploy any of their shuttles, ships, fighters, whatever. Jip was not much of a conversationalist, but he did say one very interesting thing. He walked right past Hickey and straight to the readout, and he only examined it for a few seconds before asking, when were these sensors last calibrated? Hickey responded, all within the past 11.25 standard hours. Jip then looked back at the readouts again, and then turned towards the captain. Exactly what am I supposed to be fixing again? Another half solar cycle for Hickey went by, and they were only able to increase the output by 1%. The captain would actually constantly arrive with his XO to complain, only to find both Hickey and Jip either wrist, elbow, shoulder, or waist deep in an engine compartment, as they both kept asking about repairs to the engines. They would get the same answer from both Hickey and Jip. We're trying to fix the problem. Or some amalgamation of this line every single time. Knowing that the engineers were not wasting any time, the command would just leave them to it. Eventually, though, the engineers were brought into the conference room with the rest of the engineering staff. The captain said, you have all been working extremely hard, and your work has been fully relayed in my reports. Yet to this point, our engine output has not improved by any significant margin. Due to this fact, if the situation does not improve, the ship will be scrapped, decommissioned, and your contracts will be voided, to include my own. No one wanted this to happen because getting a position with the defense fleet was dangerous for sure, but paid exceptionally well. There were many pale faces and gasp around the room as the captain continued. To stop this from happening, I have decided to bring a pair of experts on board. It has been said that this species can fix anything. Yet according to the records, none of you have ever worked with them before. With this, the engineering crew looked around, seeing that all the species of the Quark were there. Then some of them began to realize as their eyes got really big. The captain continued, I am referring to the humans. Now everyone went pale as jaws dropped, tails hit the ground, and in a few cases a couple of scales hit the ground too. Humans had actually faced off against the Quintessons before they even left their homeworld and actually won. When they began reaching out into the ether soon after with their own ships, they ended up in a war with the Picklerik. This disgusting slime of a species only cared about dominance, advancing themselves through whatever technology, stolen or otherwise, and consuming other species and planets. A species so dangerous that it becomes standard practice to detonate your own ship if you were not able to get away and knew you were going to get caught by them. Reason being, getting caught would result in unending torture, as the Picklerik found it, well, amusing and delightful that others were in so much pain and agony. The reports from the very few survivors that did actually either make it out or were rescued were considered, quote, disturbing beyond reason, unquote. When this species faced off against humans, the humans actually didn't run. Instead, they beat the Picklerik back to their own disgusting world using ships that seemed to just get more powerful over time and never, ever failed. This was the species that was coming to their ship, and it made everyone very nervous because if they fought off two dangerous species, what could they do when they got here? It was 7 rotations later, Hickey time, as the doors opened to the engine room. Everyone knew what was coming, and they turned to look. Behind a very wide amphibian that was actually much broader than the rest of the crew, walked in 2 bipeds that had to actually lower their heads to enter the door. Despite their size, they didn't seem to look super imposing. They were both dressed the same, with a single loose bodysuit, matching helmets, with some sort of dark covering over what everyone assumed was binocular vision. But there was also differences in the two. The taller was very broad and square as he walked, while the smaller one seemed more soft and curved. As each of them walked behind the XO, neither of them showed any expression of the mixture of crew that was there. That was until they both seemed to stop and adjust their faces while bringing their appendages to their faces as well. It was an odd motion. The XO tried to introduce the new humans, but as he stopped to talk, the humans seemed to look at each other, motion with their heads as though they were speaking telepathically, and then hastily walked right past the XO. It was an odd thing to do. Without a word, everyone moved away of the approaching humans as they seemed to clamber forward very, very quickly, and watched in awe as they began to pull tools out of their belts and immediately started making changes to the engines. The engineers watched this in amazement as the humans moved their bodies with incredible grace, reaching areas that normally needed mechanical assistance and barely speaking, but when they did, it was in some sort of 1 or 2 word code that they didn't understand. The engineering staff was so dumbstruck that they didn't even realize the captain had arrived in engineering. Nor did they answer him when he asked, "What are they doing?" For the next few hours, almost an entire cycle, the humans continued to work, culminating with them working on the exact same console, the readouts. When they finished, the 2 walked calmly back to the captain, claiming, "We're done." The captain was surprised, and then with a smirk to his species, he decided to test everything. "Captain to bridge. Humans say they're finished. Clear with fleet comm for FTL jump to the training area." "All right, sir. Ready to jump on your order." "Immediate jump. Engage all targets upon return to normal space." Hearing this, the humans both reached out with one of their hands and grabbed something as the countdown started. 4, 3, 2. The ship only shuddered for a moment, as the training grounds weren't far away at all. The jump only lasted a few seconds, which means there was a shudder in and a shudder out. And at that point, the humans seemed to relax a little bit. From even inside the engine room, they could all hear the heavy las cannons, the point defense lasers, tertiary defense phase cannons fire as the unmistakable sound of the interdiction field was starting up. The engineers were smug, believing that drawing that much energy from the quantum engines would overstrain the system. This would cause the safety systems to engage, ceasing all weapons and shutting down the interdiction field, what humans call the jammer. As the weapons continued to fire, the engineers slowly began to realize that the engines were running perfectly. After a few minutes, the shooting just abruptly stopped.
Captain to bridge, is there an issue with the engines?
No, sir. In fact, the engines are reading, oh, great maker, 157% output.
Then why have you stopped shooting?
We have run out of targets, sir. At this moment, everybody was in shock, as the standard amount of targets meant they should have been firing for another 10 minutes at least. The captain went pale, realizing that he had actually asked for twice as many targets than standard just to test the humans. The tall human male simply looked over at the captain and asked, "Is our work done to satisfaction?"
Yes, it is,
the captain muttered. Then the human said, "Then allow us to fill out our report, and we will take our payment and leave." As they turned to leave behind the captain, Hickey ran up to the human and grabbed its arm. "Wait!" The human female turned, feeling the tug on her arm. How did you know what to fix? You did not perform a diagnostic or even check the readouts, so how did you know?" The human female stopped, turned, and seemed to look almost confused at this question. She said, "Simply put, it smelled funny." Hickey was absolutely confused, and it showed on her face. The female continued, "We, as humans, can smell the quantum field." At that point, she touched her nose to emphasize it. "It's actually sometimes so strong we can taste it. When it gives off certain aromas, we know exactly what's wrong and how to fix it." Hickey was dumbstruck, so much that her small tail actually dropped and snapped on her thigh, kind of bringing her out of her own mind for that second. She then asked, "You can do that? How powerful is your sense of smell, or is it smell or taste?" The woman looked at the man, and he kind of gave a strange look. Again, to everyone else, it seemed as though they were talking telepathically, and everybody thought the same thing. If they can speak telepathically, why do they bother speaking at all? After this seemingly no talk back and forth, the human male walked over and got close to Hickey. So close that she could actually feel the strong heat coming off his body. She could also smell the human ever so slightly. Her species doesn't have a sense of smell, really. Only at certain times does it actually come into play. Yet now she could smell him, and she was a little enthralled by that. Yet she was more flushed as he leaned in close to her neck and breathed in deep as he slid up the neck. Less than a week, the human said, looking back to his female partner. Hickey was confused at that moment until she thought about the calendar. At that point, she blushed and went pale at the same time, as she was embarrassed at the realization that the human male could actually tell when she was about to go in heat. The female then said, "Can you get any closer?" The human male, who was still very close, simply reached out and licked the bottom of her ear that connected to her head. Hickey immediately felt a little jolt of electricity going through her body. She thought for a moment that this might be some sort of bioenergy of the humans, and then just realized that she was starting to feel something else going on. The man simply pulled back up and went, 4 days, max." The human female said, "That close, huh? Good thing we finished when we did." The human male, standing straight up now, said, "Yeah, tasted almost like pure sugar." With that, they both seemed to turn around and just leave. Before Hickey actually came back to her senses to say anything else, the humans had actually exited the room. Everyone was actually shocked at all the results, and then half the engineering crew just fell over from the quick jump as they were heading back to the station. Once they all got themselves back together, Chip walked up to Hickey and said, "I guess it's true." Hickey looked over. "What's true?" "I always heard a rumor that said humans smell weird." Hello, everybody. This is Syntax. Thank you for joining me on today's story. Before I go, I need to send two big old thank yous to a couple of my supporters, and those would be Brian Kemp and the Sir. Yeah, he just goes by Sir. Thank you both so much for helping me out on the channel. I also have to say that this story was suggested by someone on our live streams that happens every Wednesday at 18:30 Eastern Standard Time. Hopefully I'll see y'all there. Until then, this is Syntax ejecting.